This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth, for competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty, for the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We're coming off a presidential debate. It's not the be-all and end-all. We know that. It's the candidate that counts. And as I've said many times, whoever wins this next election, they are not a political messiah. They are not Jesus Christ. They're not the Father. They're there to preside over the American people for 4 years. Biden will make it that far because his health, he's essentially brain dead. I believe he probably has the onset of Alzheimer's. You know, it's problematic whether he'll even last another week. They must have had him shot up with some kind of adrenaline or some kind of drug to get him to be lucid during the debate last Thursday. But that being said, I thought that the president did well, but he had to score a knockout punch. It's now going to depend more on policy, on what he believes in. He's got to make the point, and he did, I thought he made it decently, that he's not a career politician, that Biden's been there for 47 years, he hasn't done squat, that Biden basically came out of the Senate a millionaire. How did that happen? If you're there for 47 years, you don't become a millionaire unless you've been taking bribes and graft and other things like that. But the problem is that they worked the president over so much, him and his family, that I think the American people are tuning out to that stuff. He's got to focus on the fact that the left is turning this country into a socialist communist gulag. And he's got to keep pumping that into the American people, that even the 20% in the middle and people on the left are going to be losing their freedoms and losing their liberties, and that this country is going to be driven totally down the drain. We're already hanging by a thread. I've got a guest coming on for the remainder of the show after this segment called Charles Butler. He's a radio talk show host. He's very bright. He is black. He doesn't want to be called African American. I was listening to him the other day because I was going to be on his show to talk about my book, but we kind of crossed paths and it didn't happen. We'll do it some other time. But he says, I'm an American. I'm not an African American. I'm an American. You know, I have no relationship to Africa. And then he said something similar to what the president said, you know, many months ago. But, you know, the bottom line is this, is that we are all Americans. And that beginning with Obama, and Butler knows Obama very well because they're from Chicago. They used to go to the same church, not the one with Reverend Wright, but a different one for a short period of time, is that Obama's the one who drove this country through a stake through its heart to create this great racial division and divide that we're seeing today. And it's going on and on and on and on. And that was also furthered by the social media. And Biden did his part as well. You know, I have a lawsuit, and I noticed up Joseph Biden and his campaign manager, Kate Beckencourt, or whatever the heck her name is. You see her on TV. I forget the name. Because months ago, maybe a year ago, when I, on this radio show, said that I was going to start a citizens grand jury to seek the indictment of Joseph Biden and Hunter Biden for the crimes that they obviously committed in the Ukraine and in China, taking money under the table at the same time that the vice president was the vice president. What happened then? Google YouTube took down all of Freedom Watch's TV's YouTubes for many, many years. And the only way that I got it put up is that I knew who was representing Google because I had brought an antitrust case against all the social media companies, including Google. And who was representing Google? You guessed it, none other than the Clintons' lawyers, Williams and Connolly. So I sent them an email and I said, look, unless you have your client put my YouTubes back up on immediately, all of them, I'm going to sue Google, and I'm going to include Biden as a co-defendant. They freaked out because they've been kissing Biden's derriere, thinking that he's going to be president, and they didn't want to be implicated in this kind of conduct. And so this week, I noticed Biden up for deposition shortly after the election, so it didn't look too political. And they're screaming like a stuck pig that they're going to have to be under oath. Go to freedomwatchusa.org, see what I've done. You'll see the notices of deposition up there. And notable this week as well is that the Attorney General of the United States has been promising to bring an antitrust case. You know, I'm a alumnus of the antitrust division. I helped break up AT&T, that monopoly in telecommunications, which created a lot of innovation back in the late 1970s and early 1980s when I was a lawyer in the Justice Department during Reagan's administration, and we broke up AT&T. Well, you know what? Blowhard Bill, the Attorney General, trying to take some pressure off himself because he's under a lot of pressure because he hasn't indicted one criminal, from Comey to McCabe to Clapper to Brennan to the Lovebirds to Bruce Orr. He's declared the Bidens off limits, the Clintons off limits, the Obamas off limits. I mean, the guy is a complete hack. He's protecting himself because he knows that everybody in Washington has dirt on everybody else, and there'll be blowback. It'll affect his private practice when he goes back, you know, after the Trump administration or whatever the case may be. They threatened to impeach him. They threatened to hold him in criminal contempt, the Democrats. You know, he's a coward. Well, he was a coward again. And the only reason this case came out now is so he could say he did something. But if you look at the lawsuit that was brought by the Antitrust Division, watered down, they're not asking to break up Google. They're just going to make minor fine tuning of the way it does business. Well, that's not enough. Google is part of an oligopolistic industry, which controls its dominant position. You know, in addition to being in the Antitrust Division, I was also an intern in the European Community's competition director when I was a young lawyer over there in Brussels. And the Europeans actually have, as it says, you can't abuse a dominant position. And they have fined Google trillions of dollars for their conduct. Where has the American government? What have we been doing since they've been discriminating against conservatives, since they've been censoring free speech? But you know what? Censoring also occurs on the side of our so-called allies. Let me give you a good example. Newsmax, which is run by Chris Ruddy, who I used to write a column for called Clayman's Court. They censored me. I only got about 20% of anything I wrote published there. That's why, I go with WorldNet Daily, which is, courageous. I've been with them now for decades. Ruddy, by the way, they try to pass themselves off as conservative, but Ruddy gave $1 million to the Clinton Foundation. He plays both sides of the street. So we have censorship on the conservative side too. And in fact, I've got lawsuits against Newsmax for participating allegedly in the defamation of Dr. Jerome Corsi on behalf of Roger Stone, when Stone was fearful that Corsi might testify and say something that could implicate him. Jerry never intended to do that, but Stone is paranoid. And of course, now he's been convicted of 7 separate felony counts. By the grace of his chinny chin chin, the president commuted a sentence, but he is still a convicted felon. And in fact, he can't vote in this election, I don't believe, in Florida. But that's where we are right now, is that the corruption on both sides of the political aisle. And this is why the Republican establishment dislikes the president as well, because he's tried to break this up. But, to some extent, he's going along with it at this point. It's why my book, Takes a Revolution, is so important. Forget the scandal industry, because we, the people, need to rise up. We, the people, need to do what needs to be done. We need to take the country back. We need to wage a peaceful and legal revolution. I've even suggested, as I'm going to talk about with Charles later on in the show, that we form our own government. Go back to Philadelphia, where it all began. We can push the leftists out of Philadelphia, currently a very corrupt city, but it wasn't corrupt in the days of July 4th, 1776, where we envisioned a new nation under God with liberty and justice for all. We don't have that anymore. And the primary problem that we have are our federal judges. Thomas Jefferson, who I believe was the greatest of our founding fathers, said that we should not have federal judges because they would be unelected and there for life. Of course, they're not there for life. Read the Constitution. They're only served for good behavior. That's a misnomer. And then the Supreme Court gave these federal judges immunity, and they gave themselves immunity. So you can't have any recourse when they make an intentionally wrong decision that harms people or harms interests of the American people. And this is the problem that we face. So I have suggested that we actually abandon Washington, let the criminals that are there in all three branches of government commit crimes against each other, let them have fun, and let's reestablish a new government in Philadelphia like we did in 1776. We can do it. Suppose we selected people, to had our own presidential election. Suppose we then, the new president, selected cabinet members and did those kinds of things. Suppose we simply break away from the current government, which is so corrupt and not representing the American people. That government, by the way, has worked to destroy President Trump. And he's hanging by a thread right now. The odds are right now, unless, it happens like in 2016, the odds are this is an extremely close election. And we have to be prepared to what happens. If the president does win, by the grace of God, you're going to see every major city burn. You're going to see these leftists on your front lawn demanding the keys to your house and to your car, threatening the lives of you and your family. We need to also use our Second Amendment rights and get prepared for that. That was something that King George III, that was one of the major things that triggered the revolution. He tried to take all of the arms away from the colonies. And that's why we have a Second Amendment. That's why we have militias written into the Second Amendment to protect against the tyranny of an evil government. And I'm not advocating violence, but I have suggestions like citizens' grand juries that we'll talk about later in the show, and I've talked about many times, and other suggestions on how we can form our own government by and for the people. And as of right now, we cannot depend on President Trump. He's going to only be there for 4 years, even if he wins. I'm going to be right back with Charles Butler. Until then, go out and purchase my book, It Takes a Revolution, at Amazon.com and all major booksellers.
Dangerous.
You don't hear, use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with Charles Butler, a very talented individual, someone who I was listening to the other day on the radio show. I was going to be on his show, and our paths crossed. But I asked him to come on our show because he's very, very intelligent. He makes a lot of points with humor, which is, I think, the way to do it in today's world. You have to laugh or otherwise you're going to cry. He is the talk show host of Reality Check radio show on Red State Talk Radio. I want to introduce you to Charles. I'm going to have him on over and over again. And I want to get his take, not just on the debate last night, which was, of course, Thursday night with the president and Joe Biden, but the dynamics of what's going on right now, and also what's going on in the African-American community, because Charles is an African-American conservative. And they, of course, as I've said many, many times, are the most courageous people out there. White people are running for the exits these days, but the conservative blacks are standing up to the tyranny that we face in today's world. Charles, I introduce you to our audience at Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Give us your take on the debate between Joe Biden and the president on Thursday night.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your show. Appreciate it. I like to say, and before we get started, that, most black people don't like the term African American. That's a romanticized label that Jesse Jackson and his ilk decided to take and stick in the eye of Whitey. I'm a black American. I don't know nothing about Africa. Don't want to have anything to do with Africa. And if you notice that black people don't go to Congress and lobby for what? Africa. Okay. Irish people go and lobby for Ireland and, da-da-da-da-da. Black folks don't lobby for the African nations. Anyway, moving forward. Last night, great debate, I thought. Trump cleaned Biden's clock, But if you look at, I was listening to the opposition to CNN and MSNBC because I had hosted a debate party, so I didn't get to see the other stations. We just stayed on the debate. And, where we were, and in my debate party, which was a Republican group, we thought that it was overwhelmingly Trump. But you turn to CNN and MSNBC, and these people are like, oh, well, Biden held his own. And I'm going, what has Biden ever done? I mean, Biden talks about all the things he's going to do for black people. He hasn't done jack. Same way with Obama. They took money from HBCUs. Now, if Trump had some real black people on his campaign, some seasoned black people like myself or Raynard Jackson, we know where the skeletons are buried. We know where the skeletons are buried, both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. That's why people don't want us around. We're like that old English sheepdog. Nobody will, we're kind of moody, we're kind of snippety, and nobody really wants to talk to us or have us around until the wolf shows up. Okay. But the reality is, I think the president really pointed out their differences in terms of the COVID. They keep telling lies on the president about COVID-19. I mean, his response has been excellent. If he had taken any other steps, he would have been a dictator, draconian, overbearing. He's trying to take over the country. So the guy could win either way it goes, and he knows that.
Well, you're talking about the commentary on the different networks, but I tuned in on Fox afterwards. I'm interested to see Chris Wallace's response because, in my view, he's such a despicable individual. He's a leftist in sheep's clothing. And he essentially trashed the president. He said Biden effectively had won. He did that this morning on Fox News as well. What's your take on where Fox News is going these days?
Well, I think Fox News has moved dramatically to the left. And I think the hosts are moving dramatically to the left. I don't like Fox News. I don't watch it like I used to. I don't like the commentators. I don't like the coverage. I think that they've become Fox News light, not Fox News light, but Fox News light, and it's kind of a disappointment, to tell you the truth.
As well as the president did, the thing that somewhat troubled me, and of course, I support the president like you do personally, is the fact that Biden did seem to be lucid. Okay, they obviously shot him up with some kind of drug. We'll be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this president.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with Charles Butler. I was saying that the president, I thought, did well last night, but he had a couple openings that he could have used. And one was that when Biden said, well, I'm the person that everybody knows has integrity. I'm the person that everybody knows is honest. And I thought the president was kind of light on Biden with regard to what's been going on with the Ukraine and with China and Hunter and Bobolewski, or whatever his name is, the business partner who came forward last week. What do you think, Charles? I think the president could have been a lot tougher during that debate.
Yeah, he could have been a lot tougher, but regardless of what the president said or did, I think, Larry, that it would have been blown out of proportion. He would have been charged with being an ogre. So I think he did well just to address it, let Biden skate. I mean, you have people listening to CNN, MSNBC, where no one's denying, the Bidens are not denying that it's not Hunter's laptop, yet the people that be are saying we're not gonna address this issue right now because it's Joe Biden and he's just above reproach, and no one's above reproach. I'm sorry.
Well, that's right. And I guess the issue here is, and I think the president did a good job on this, pointing out that he's not a politician, that he actually has done something, that he's been in the private sector, that he hasn't been just basically occupying space like Biden for 47 years. He pointed out that Biden has several houses. I mean, how are you a U.S. senator most of the time making, less than $200,000 in and around Washington, D.C., which next to New York City is the most expensive place to live in the United States, and have a lot of different houses? Obviously, he's been taking graft and bribes and everything else, as everybody else in Washington does, for that matter. And, I've written a new book, Charles. I'm going to send it to you. It's called It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. It's on sale this Tuesday. You can pre-order it. And I'm basically saying is that I don't think anymore, and I want to get your take on this. I've been a lawyer now for 43 years. I was sworn in Florida by the Florida Supreme Court, ironically, on December 7th, 1977, Pearl Harbor Day. Okay, maybe that should have been an omen of things to come. And I've scored a number of victories in my legal career, and I made a name for myself at Judicial Watch, and then I ran for the Senate in Florida. I didn't win. Then I started Freedom Watch, which was the name that was given to me by West Wing. They had created this character, Harry Claypool, of Freedom Watch. But I say in this book, and I'm honest, I'm not beating my chest like my former colleague Fitton, who mostly just gets documents saying how great it is, another Judicial Watch victory. I'm saying is that I barely scratched the surface. I haven't accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. And it now takes a revolution. And it was Thomas Jefferson who said he was against, for instance, Article 3 of the Constitution, which allows for federal judges, which creates a situation, as he pointed out, that you have unelected despots on the federal bench, that these people are not accountable to the American people. They're no more honest than anybody else in society. And then they come along and they say, well, I have life tenure. And the Constitution doesn't even give them life tenure. It says they shall serve for good behavior. And then the Supreme Court gives the justices and gives the lower court judges immunity. So you can't even sue them or hold them accountable when they make a decision which is harmful to you as a litigant or your client. And what my book is saying is that every branch of government, whether it's the executive branch, which is now controlled by a deep state on both sides, more powerful than the president. We've seen what they've done to try to destroy President Trump. And then you've got the legislature, which is a bunch of court jesters, fools, and criminals, essentially stuffing money into their pockets by special interest groups, not representing the needs of the American people. And then you've got federal judges who are put there to protect us from the tyranny of the other two branches, and they've become worse than the other two branches. And the only option is revolution. And I make, suggestions for a peaceful and legal revolution. But I'm afraid, Charles, I want to get your thoughts on this, because you are from the Black community. Sorry for calling you African American. I actually set you up so you would make that distinction, because I heard you make it on the radio show the other day, and I just was rolling over in laughter. I know you don't want to say it on Radio America, but you were referring to what you thought of Africa at the time, but yeah, you can say it. But in any event, see, I don't see any option other than revolution. I don't think it can be solved at the ballot box. If President Trump wins, that's good. It arrests the downward slide, for 4 years somewhat. But we have hit rock bottom, and it's not going to stop. The demographics in this country are working against conservatives and people of faith and libertarians. And on top of that, the corruption has reached cancerous levels, where, as Jefferson and John Adams predicted it would. And it was Jefferson who said, when the people fear the government, there's tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there's liberty. And then he said, we're going to come to a point in time, and primarily as a result of these federal judges, where we're going to have to shed the blood of patriots again every but 20 years. And what's a few thousand dead to preserve the tree of liberty? I don't agree with that, okay? And I don't think Jefferson wanted to see violence either. But he was a realist, and he realized that that was probably going to happen. And I think, and this is where I want to get you to weigh in, is that whoever wins this election on November 3rd we're going to see violence in the streets. We're going to see burning, looting, stealing, and killing to an even greater degree than what we've seen in the last several months. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, we might see violence, but what we don't address once these anarchists like Antifa and these people, get out and threaten people and try to intimidate people, and it's like the young man. And I understand where you're going with this, but I think people like us, we're taking the attitude like the young man in Kenosha. I'm trying to do my best to be a good citizen, to do the right thing. However, if push comes to shove, I'm not going to turn the other cheek. I'm not going to let you hurt me. I'm not going all that Martin Luther King stuff, which I never really agreed with in the first place. I thought was a bunch of bull. This young man protected himself from these anarchists. I mean, he was attacked. He was hit in the head with a skateboard. He had a gun pulled on him, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to fight back. So and the thing about these paperweight liberals or these paperweight patriots or whatever, the protesters, whatever the hell they want to call themselves, is when it's their blood, as I usually tell them, this is not going to be a video game. This is going to be your blood. So they have a new attitude because these are generally people who've never had a spanking, let alone get in a fight. But they talk a great game. It's like, we have men today or males today in America who actually think that they can just say anything to you without any consequences. And I have to remind people, like I had to remind my friend once, Roland Martin. I said, Roland, you need to be careful what you say because you're going to let your mouth write a check that your behind can't cash. And, he and I are cool. But he said something to a friend of mine, Horace Cooper, and they almost got into a fight on the set because here's a guy who's obviously not a fighter. Now, he has a big mouth. He talks a lot of smack. But Horace was getting ready to go whip his behind. I mean, that's remember in those days, the congressmen fought on the floors. The congressmen had duels. The House was a very raucous place. The Senate was a little bit more gentlemanly, but the House was totally raucous and rowdy, and people fought. In fact, I remember my friend J.C. Watts almost getting in a fight on the floor of the House with one of his own members.
No, I mean, that's a good point. I wasn't advocating offensive, and I wasn't advocating violence. I was advocating.
I know you weren't, but you were saying that it may come.
Yeah, what is in effect a counter-revolution? Okay, so you start it, and we'll finish it. That's the bottom line. And that was Wyatt Earp. Okay, in the old days, he didn't want to get into the OK Corral and have his brothers killed after that, but he finished it after that. I'm not advocating hurting anybody, but we need to have some solutions here. And one of my solutions is to have citizens' grand juries, which Justice Scalia said the grand jury belongs to the American people, not to the three branches of government. We have the right to impanel grand juries, to indict, to convict, to try, to sentence, and to mete out those sentences. We don't have a Justice Department anymore. I'm a former alumnus. I was disillusioned enough when I was there. I saw people being prosecuted on the wrong side of the street and those getting protected that were on the right side of the street. And this was during Reagan. And, I was offended. I went off and I did international trade for a number of years, and then I started Judicial Watch because I saw how corrupt the whole system was. But at the present time, the American people need to rise up. They cannot view anyone as their political messiah, as much as I like the president, and they have to do it for themselves. And it's going to come a point in time when the left, and we probably won't have a winner on November 3rd, and that's when they'll go to the streets. And that's when we're going to have to decide what we do. Do we sit there? Do we take it? Do we see them burn, loot, and everything else as the president sits back and says, well, the state and local governors can do it? There's the Insurrection Act. He could have rounded them all up and thrown them in prison right when it started. But for political reasons, he didn't. And I understand that. But we, the American people, can't take it anymore. You remember that movie, The Network, when the guy stuck his neck out of the window and said, I can't take it anymore? It's an old movie. Mm-hmm. I think we're at the point that we can't because we're losing our country. And that's my thought. And that's why I want people to go out and buy my book, It Takes a Revolution. Forget the scandal industry. Turn off Hannity, who's got an 8th grade education, repeats the same thing every night, and get to work.
I think that you're absolutely right. But I think that we've lost the country, and we need to take back the country. When you have a Chief Justice like Roberts, who you can't count on to implement and interpret the law, where do you go? Obamacare is not you can't create a tax law in the Senate. That's just basic, That's basic constitutional law or, 101. Revenue laws are generated in the House, not the Senate. And they know this, but does the average American people know it? A person know it? No. And so we get into these situations where we're being sold out by people who are supposed to be the stewards of our country.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I guess the thing that also gets under my skin, we've got 2 minutes to go in this segment. Hang around for the verdict. You can give the verdict today, is that these people get up and they talk like Biden. Well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. They can't do squat. They can't do expletive deleted because it depends on Congress to enact tax laws. It depends on Congress to reform immigration laws. And when you try to do it otherwise, then you have these Obama and Clinton judges blocking you every step of the way. And now we've got Trump judges. And as I say in my book, as I show in my book, I detail it. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. You can get it at Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, all over the place, is that Trump doesn't know who he appointed to the bench. Just like Bush the dad appointed Roberts, who's a closet leftist in more ways than one. You can't depend on the judiciary to straighten things out anymore. And then Congress is totally out of control and deadlocked. And that's why the American people are faced with a situation like they had in 1776, where they couldn't reason with the crown. And they had to do what they had to do to form a new nation. And I believe that's where we are today. I've even said, metaphorically, let's form our own government in Philadelphia. Let's go back to our roots and forget about the people in Washington. Let the criminals commit crimes against each other. It's a way of making a point. Whether that will happen, obviously, it's more metaphoric than actual. But that's where we are today. We're going to be right back with the verdict section of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. And I want to have Charles give his prognostication of where he thinks this country's headed. We'll be right back. And until then, go to freedomwatchusa.org and sign up for our Justice League and see if you qualify for our citizens' grand juries against the Chi-Coms for destroying this country and the rest of the world. I'll be right back.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with Charles Butler, a very, very smart, wise individual, someone who goes up against the grain like I do. That's why I took to him when I was listening to his show the other day. He's not afraid to say what he thinks. He doesn't care what people think. He says what he thinks right. Charles, where do you think this country's headed? What do you think is going to be the outcome, say, in 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think that we're going to, and I hope that we put an end to or a halt on the just basic moral decay in this country. I listen to people who talk about values and morals and issues, and they don't have any. They don't understand that there is a right and there is a wrong. People say things like, well, They're your facts, and there are other facts. And I mean, when I listen to people today, I think that they are so ignorant in terms of having a debate, of having an intelligent discussion. They don't have any facts. They run off talking points. Like last night, Biden, he kept going back to talking points. The guy couldn't focus on a topic that was substantive because he hasn't done anything substantive. He just kept talking about what he was going to do. Well, what did you do in 47 years? You can't point to any accomplishments, dude. I mean, really? I mean,
other than throwing black people in prison.
Well, yeah, that was it.
One accomplishment, quote unquote.
Exactly. That was his big accomplishment. But he didn't fund HBCUs. He has an HBCU right there in Delaware called Delaware State College. The damn near school was damn near bankrupt and out of business. Biden didn't put any money in that school, never lobbied for money for Delaware State. And the stories go on and on and on. When he told that young man the other night at his town hall, he said, we Barack Obama and I, we had a program that guaranteed loans for blacks. It's a damn lie. Blacks have never gotten guaranteed loans in these programs after the Democrats bastardized the term minority with white women and Asians and Latinos and anybody but a white man. So anybody in this country is a minority except the white male. I mean, how crazy is that? White guys got up every day and went to work for white women, and plus that, white women are 52% of the population, or women or something. I can't remember the stats right now. But anyway, bottom line is, I want to see this country get back to being red, white, and blue, getting back to having morals and values, getting back to have God in this discourse. Those are the things that I would like to see, and I think are coming, and that people are demanding. And we have to get away from this. Whatever I feel I want to do or think I want to do, it is. This is America. But remember, John Adams said that the Constitution was written only for a moral and religious people. Without those bridles, human passions cannot be bridled. That's a paraphrase.
Well, that's right. He said, without ethics, morality, and religion, it won't matter how many times you change your rulers or forms of government, there will not be a lasting liberty. And that is very true. And that is what we're working to create right now. But right now, what we see in Washington, D.C., and this is why both sides hate the president, the Republican establishment and the Democrats, is because they are so corrupt and they're so focused on themselves and enriching themselves with power and with money that the country is sliding downward. And that's why I want people to go out and get my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. Get it at Amazon.com and all the major booksellers. And I want you to tune into Charles's show. Charles, tell people where they can hook up with you, because they need to listen to you unbridled. Okay.
Unbridled, huh? Yeah. Well, I'm at Red State Talk Radio Monday through Friday at 2:00 Eastern. We also do a YouTube show during that time. You can just go The Reality Check with Charles Butler, and you'll see me live out there. And thanks again, Larry, for allowing me to come.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
We'll be in touch, brother. Okay, you stay safe, okay? Because what you say will provoke a lot of thought, and more than thought. God bless.
I enroll because going to the doctor shouldn't be a difficult choice.
Whatever your reason for needing health insurance, Nevada HealthLink is here for you. Enrollment starts November 1st at nevadahealthlink.com.